Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Joint Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. Secretary Hao, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. This is a hearing on the administration's economic development plan. By statute, a new administration has to submit an economic development plan, and we have to hold a hearing, and then after that, it goes to the governor, and then we anticipate an economic development bill to follow. So this is an opportunity to hear from Secretary Hao. It's by invitation only. So we'll hear from Secretary, and then if any committee members have questions, but it's not a public hearing. I just want to introduce the House members of the committee. We have Rep. Andy Vargas, who's the Vice Chair, Rep. Meridian, who's the Ranking Member, Rep. Ash, Rep. Murray, Rep. Phillips, Rep. Giannino, Rep. Beal, Rep. Williams, Rep. Lenatra, Rep. Diggs, Rep. McKenna, and Rep. Vaughn.
Thank you, and appreciate everyone coming here today, and welcome, Secretary. I'd also like to introduce the Vice Chair of this committee, Senator Liz Miranda, who has joined us. Also members of the committee are Joanne Comerford, Senator John Cronin, Senator Adam Gomez, Senator Susan Moran, and Senator Patrick M. O'Connor.
Thank you. Also just want to recognize Rep. Ferrante, who was a member of the commission and formerly chaired this committee. Thank you for being here. So Secretary Howell, we'll just get started and let you talk to us about the economic development plan. Thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to Chair Finegold, Chair Parisella, and the entire committee for having me today. I'm here to testify on our economic development plan titled Team Massachusetts, Leading Future Generations. This plan is a result of months of collaboration with our strong partners in the legislature, key stakeholders, and the entire cabinet. We hope the plan can serve as a guide for our economic development priorities over the coming months and years. I want to especially thank many of you for your contributions to this process, including Chair Finegold, Chair Parisella, and Rep. Ferrante, who served as the speaker's appointee on this effort. And I'm excited that we were able to hand out our Team Massachusetts bracelets to this important committee. You are all important members of Team Massachusetts, and we want to thank our friends at Mass Life Sciences who gave these to us, and we want to make sure you all can represent us. So we have a few slides to go through. Why don't we talk through the background and process for creating the economic development plan, and then I'll then speak to the macroeconomic context. And then we will finally talk about the actual content and priorities, and then we'll wrap up with any feedback and questions. So first, if we go to the background. So as you know, each new administration is required to produce an economic development plan for the Commonwealth, along with a strategic plan for implementing it. We're very appreciative of this requirement from the legislature because it encourages us to go out into the community and to speak with all of our business members and all the folks in our ecosystem. It gives us the opportunity to hear about what is working, what's not working, what can be improved, and where are the opportunities to win. Other items that the statute requires are long-term goals and measurable benchmarks, in addition to major economic development initiatives. After considering these requirements and kicking off the process, we set our goal to enable every single person here to earn a living, to thrive, to have great careers, and to enable every single company here to start here, stay here, grow here, and succeed here. If you go to the next slide. So you can see we kicked off this process in early 2023 by first appointing an Economic Development Planning Council. We included members from across the state, from different industries and organization types, to ensure that we were getting diverse viewpoints. We were fortunate to have Chair Finegold and Representative Ferrante serve on the council, and we also worked closely with Chair Parisella throughout the process. We also included many industry experts, and actually including J.D. Chesloff, who's here today representing. Thank you, J.D., as well as folks like Julie Kim from Takeda to represent life sciences, Stephen Ellis from Montague, who represented rural economic development interests, Dr. Kevin Tabb from Beth Israel Lahey Health to represent healthcare, and also folks like Lynn Lloyd from the Mill Cities Community Investments. So we had many really talented folks participating on this council. After setting up the council and holding our first meeting, we began then organizing our listening sessions throughout the state and also sector-specific breakouts. I'll share more information on those sessions in the next slide. Over the summer, we held another council meeting to discuss the topics that arose during those sessions, and then we developed several hypotheses. And then during the fall, we produced a draft that was voted on and approved unanimously by the council. Now we're here testifying on it, and soon the governor will approve it, and then we will post it online. But most importantly, I think, is that we want to work closely together with all of you to bring this to life as an economic development bill, as the chair had mentioned. So on this slide, you can see to maximize feedback and input, we held 4 economic development planning council meetings, which we just talked about. But also, in addition, we had these 9 regional sessions across the state. And we also had the first ever Spanish-speaking listening session, and also 13 subsector sessions. Throughout the regional sessions and virtual Spanish-speaking sessions, we heard from more than 1,300 people. These were open to the public. Folks enthusiastically participated in our breakout sessions on community and neighborhood development, key clusters and innovation, workforce and talent, equity and opportunity, and business climate. And by having the additional subsector working groups, we were able to get in the weeds on recommendations for education, healthcare and hospitals, financial capital, life sciences, tech, venture, climate, real estate, small businesses, tourism, advanced manufacturing, and the rural economy. The captains of these subsector groups were all members of the Economic Development Planning Council, and they presented their recommendations to the full council for consideration. Many of the ideas in this plan came directly from all of the folks who participated in all of these sessions. So we'll go to the next slide. So moving now, so that was kind of the process of how we got here. This next section is really about some of the research we did on where we are right now in terms of an economy. So this is the macroeconomic context. So on this slide, we can see that we did a lot of analysis on the macroeconomy, and our analysis found what many of us already knew to be true, that Massachusetts is starting from a place of many relative and unique strengths, and many of our economic indicators point to a thriving economy. You see the governor's quote up on top here. And we are world leaders in many sectors, such as higher education, healthcare and hospitals, life sciences, and financial intellectual capital. Remarkably, the financial intellectual sector alone contributes about 25% of our state's GDP, which is about $157 billion, and employs approximately 533,000 individuals, about 15% of our workforce. The healthcare sector is one of the state's largest sectors in terms of employment, which is about almost 20% of jobs. And life sciences employs almost 100,000 residents as well. We are a leader in so many ways. You can see all the statistics here. We are leaders in venture funding. We are home to the most educated population in the country. We invest heavily in our nation's leading public education system. We have over 100 universities and colleges that are the envy of the world, and we draw talent from around the globe here to Massachusetts. On a per capita income basis, we rank first among all states, and we also are first in terms of venture funding per capita, and we're also first in terms of NIH grants received. It's also why 18 of the top 20 largest global life sciences companies are headquartered here. Also, if you look, our commitment to our values, if you flip to the next section here, our commitment to our values is very important, and Massachusetts has a strong history of achievements and leading when it comes to firsts. We're the first in establishing a public school and public library, pioneering universal health care, and recognizing marriage equality. And we also are extremely fortunate to benefit from a very balanced and responsible governance, spanning across Democratic and Republican administrations, and in partnership with all of the strong leadership in our state legislature. And there's momentum building. So on the right-hand side, you can see here, we have a lot of recent wins, even in this current Healey-Driscoll administration, which is focused on equity, affordability, and competitiveness across all regions and all humans. So in the last 11 months or so, we've already won federal selection to host the ARPA-H Investor Catalyst Hub, one of only 2 in the country. We've won 2 major awards via the Federal CHIPS and Science Act, the Microelectronics Commons Hub, which is hosted by Mass Tech, one of our quasis, and the Ocean Tech Hub in Rhode Island in Massachusetts, which is a partnership we have. We've also passed meaningful tax relief in partnership with all of you, first one in 20 years that'll help support families and businesses, and we've adopted a budget that made historic investments in education, workforce development, climate innovation, and local aid. So these are a lot of statistics and facts that we should be very proud of, and that put us in a very strong and unique position to start with. If you go to the next slide. However, as we looked at the macroeconomic context, we also saw that there have been some recent changes that we should be aware of, and these are unfortunately somewhat less positive. So during the pandemic, the state lost nearly 700,000 jobs. While the Massachusetts economy is now back to pre-pandemic levels, our recovery has been slower than many other states. In March of 2023, our job count finally returned to pre-pandemic levels, but it took approximately 3 years for Massachusetts to regain those lost jobs. Also, if you look at this chart, our growth post-pandemic is below the U.S. average and well below states such as Utah, which have experienced much faster growth of population and the economy over the last several years post-pandemic. Our shrinking labor force and an aging population contribute to workforce shortages that further divides the gap between hiring rates and job openings throughout all industries and sectors in all regions, and this also contributes to slower economic growth. So this area here in the middle is an area of concern, is our population. Pre-pandemic, Massachusetts showed consistent population growth, bolstered by a steady stream of international immigrants that outweighed domestic outmigration. However, if you look on the right-hand side in the middle there, post-pandemic, this trend has taken a worrying turn. Our population is instead decreasing, and the rate of domestic outmigration of the state has doubled. In 2022 alone, we saw an average of nearly 1,100 individuals leaving Massachusetts per week. While some residents leaving are retirees, the majority are recent graduates and families. And when we looked at why people are leaving, we found that the same few reasons continue to show up. Remote work, particularly for tech companies, has given people freedom to live everywhere and not have to live here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is also seen as an expensive state, which could explain why the two states that residents are most frequently moving to are New Hampshire and Florida, neither of which have state income tax. The pandemic and more stringent federal policies have also slowed down international immigration to Massachusetts. So if these outmigration trends persist, our workforce will continue to age and shrink, which will ultimately have negative effects on our potential economic growth. So that is concerning. The last row here on this chart is around our economic inequality. While we are the most educated and the wealthiest state in the country by several measures, we are also one of the most unequal states, with the third highest Gini coefficient in 2022. Our Black and Latino residents have lower per capita income compared to white and Asian household incomes, and that is beneath the statewide per capita averages. And there's also a lot of variance by region. So this is also a worrying trend. So if we go to the next section here, that was some of the macroeconomic context that led into our plan. We now want to talk about the plan itself and the priorities. So if we go to the next slide, over the course of the economic development planning process, we spent time determining what tools are at our disposal to best execute an economic development plan. After many internal discussions and evaluations, we've concluded that there are unique powers that we as a state can use effectively to drive economic development in partnership with our colleagues in the legislature and other members of our state's economic development ecosystem. So these levers are, number one is we can convene. We can bring people together to communicate, align, and collaborate. Number two, we have resources. We can allocate state funds and all of our different incentives and programs. Number three, we have regulations and laws. So we can pass, repeal, and amend laws and regulations. Number four, we are a customer ourselves as a state. We can use our state purchasing power around goods and services. And number five, we can message and communicate. We have an ability to amplify and convey messages. So we kept these key state levers in mind as we worked on crafting our plan. So this is the plan, Team Massachusetts Leading Future Generations. Oftentimes, the hardest part of creating a plan is figuring out the best name. We put all this work into all of the details, but then we needed to have a name that could really kind of convey the energy and our excitement around the plan. Given where we are in the world, given the uncertainty and the challenges, and given the opportunities we have as Massachusetts to lead and demonstrate a better way forward, we wanted to name this plan Team Massachusetts Leading Future Generations. Massachusetts can be an innovative, mission-driven, high-growth economy that solves the biggest problems facing our world, things like curing disease, addressing climate change, improving healthcare, and educating our young talent. And we can do all of this while being a humane place to live, where we embrace diversity, celebrate freedoms, reinforce science, take care of communities and each other, and value safety for everyone. Achieving this vision will ensure that we lead for future generations by making Massachusetts the best place in the nation for individuals to pursue rewarding careers and for companies to start and scale and succeed. So that is why we chose this title, Team Massachusetts Leading Future Generations. Okay, so that's the title, and then now we'll go into the details. So this next page outlines the overall framework for the Healey-Driscoll administration's 2023 Economic Development Plan. So before I jump into specifics, I want to call out some important framing around the guiding principles of the plan. First, we must achieve this vision in a way that focuses on the Healey-Driscoll administration's priorities of equity, affordability, and competitiveness. Second, we must be intentional about ensuring our plan reaches residents in all regions across the diversity of all backgrounds and experiences. And as noted earlier in my presentation, the North Star here is to make Massachusetts the best place for all of our talent and for all of our businesses. With this in mind, we're proposing a plan that has three main priorities for economic development and supported by specific initiatives underneath each of them. I'll go into these in more detail in subsequent slides. So the first main priority is around fundamentals, here on the left-hand side. In order for us to have any kind of economic development, we need to have great fundamentals. So the state must continue to invest in the fundamentals that enable residents, businesses, and regions to succeed. The following imperatives are vital as part of these fundamentals: addressing housing and transportation, and investing in infrastructure and competitiveness. The second main priority in the middle here is around talent. For our state, economic growth starts with talent. The people of Massachusetts have long driven the state's economy, and we need to better retain and attract talent to be successful in moving forward. Our approach will be built around two components. We want to be the global talent magnet, and we want to tell our story as part of that. And third, on the right-hand side here, we have the third priority, which is around sectors. Massachusetts has a diverse set of industries and businesses within our economy. And in order to succeed going forward, the Healey-Driscoll administration intends to deploy sector-specific initiatives to address unique issues by sector. We are not a huge state, so we need to focus on the sectors where we have competitive advantages and a right to win. To do this, we are focusing our strategy around three components. The first is lengthening the lead in the areas we lead in already, which includes life sciences and healthcare, advanced manufacturing, robotics, and AI applied to specific industries. The second is around catalyzing new leadership sectors, including areas like climate tech and tourism, and culture and arts. And the last piece is really making things easy for businesses across every sector. So we're going to go into details on each of these three. So first on fundamentals. First, you can see here on fundamentals, we know that we have challenges in housing and transportation. So we have actually let Secretary Augustus and Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt and their teams write their chapters for the Economic Development Plan, and they are working on many, many initiatives here. So in housing, we know that the high cost of housing for renters and homeowners is a strain on the state's economic development prospects. And so the administration is leveraging all of our operating resources, our capital funds, and our policy provisions, such as zoning reform, to increase the supply of housing. So this is an urgent priority that I know Secretary Augustus is working on. And in terms of transportation, we know that too much time is consumed by congestion and delays on the state's transit network. Led by Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt and Mass DOT, the state is improving our network reliability, and we're focusing on enabling people to reach their businesses and their destinations much easier. And in addition to all of that, we also want to continue to invest in the fundamentals around infrastructure and competitiveness. On infrastructure, we have a very successful program, as many of you know, the Community One Stop. We want to continue to build on that and to make strategic investments in infrastructure across all of our state, including in our gateway cities, as well as launching a new focus on rural communities. And on competitiveness, we will invest in projects and programs around high-quality internet and broadband and cell service. We want to increase the predictability in permitting, and also we want to create a cross-secretariat competitives cabinet to unlock transformational projects. So that's the fundamentals. So if we go to the second big priority around talent, we want to be the global talent magnet. So economic growth in our state starts with talent. And this plan includes several initiatives that embraces each type of talent. So for college students, we'll create a new statewide internship program, which will connect college students and Massachusetts companies, with the goal of retaining young emerging talent post-graduation. For international talent, with proactive leadership, the state will scale the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program to enable immigrants to stay in Massachusetts and then in the U.S. For non-college paths, we'll leverage the Workforce Skills Cabinet and Mass Talent to streamline resources to help residents find job training and employers, and help employers find the skilled talent that they need to grow their businesses. And for trades and professions, we will increase access and open pathways to in-demand occupations under the oversight of the Division of Occupational Licensure. The other piece of talent is really around telling our Massachusetts story. We have so many unique strengths, and we have a strong vision around being the best place to work, live, and to start and scale companies. And we want to be both a strong, innovation-driven economy that's focused on solving important mission-driven problems, and we want to be an amazing place to live that is human and humane and that really embraces freedoms and communities. However, right now, the perception and coverage in the news doesn't always reflect the reality of our strengths or the inspiration of our vision. So we want to work together and convene to launch an authentic, bottoms-up, consistent narrative that really talks about Team Massachusetts and why everyone should be here to work together on this vision. And that will help us retain and attract our talent. So that's the talent section. If we go to this next slide, this is the third big bucket around sectors. So this administration is committed to creating an environment that continues to fuel innovation and capitalize on opportunities to lengthen the lead in key sectors. So, in life sciences and healthcare, we already are world leaders here, and we want to coordinate with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services with Secretary Walsh, and also to leverage our ARPA-H hub win, and to think hard about the Life Sciences 3.0 reauthorization, and how to think bigger about maximizing the entire ecosystem and lengthening our lead, and tackling the big opportunities that still remain in innovation, health equity, and affordability. Another area in lengthening the lead is around advanced manufacturing and robotics. Here we will capitalize on our Microelectronics Commons chips win, and we want to strengthen our ecosystem around cutting-edge advanced manufacturing, robotics, and all areas of that ecosystem. And then the last piece here in lengthening the lead is around AI for X, which is really AI applied to specific industry problems. And in partnership with the Executive Office of Technology Services and Security, with Secretary Snyder, we will be convening an AI strategic task force, and we'll be developing programs to support AI adoption in our leading sectors, such as education and financial services. We anticipate the impact of rapidly evolving technologies here, including quantum computing. So that is the lengthening lead section of sectors. The next piece is really around catalyzing new sector leadership. So here, Massachusetts is well positioned to capture new leadership in places like climate tech and tourism and arts and culture. On climate tech, Massachusetts is already a leader in fighting climate change. Working in partnership with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and Secretary Tepper, as well as the Mass Clean Energy Center and our new CEO, Emily Reichert, we also want to be intentional about creating the world's leading climate tech ecosystem, similar to our success in life sciences. In our tourism and culture and arts, we have so many resources here, and we have the upcoming 250th anniversary of the founding of our country. We aim to invest more in tourism and culture and arts so that we can lead on the 250th and increase our economic impact throughout the state. And then the last piece of sectors is really making things easy for all businesses across every sector. We want to create a business front door. We have so many great state resources and programs, but they're really difficult to navigate. So we plan to create a simple, centralized portal that will create a one front door for businesses to access state incentives and enable more coordinated, organized responses from the state. This portal will benefit all sectors, including small businesses and international companies looking to expand here. So those are the three main priorities in the plan, as well as the specific initiatives. Let's move on to the next piece here. So now that I've gone through all of those three big priorities around fundamentals, talent, and sectors, we want to talk about how we're going to track success. So a plan is only as good as the implementation that brings it to life. The Healey-Driscoll administration is committed to an equitable, inclusive approach to economic development and opportunity creation in the Commonwealth. Accordingly, we will track key metrics and indicators to confirm that we are making progress in achieving our state's vision. The key elements of this work will include creating a public-facing dashboard to track key economic, demographic, financial, and equity-related data related to the Commonwealth's economic development goals and objectives, providing accountability with tracking and measuring of performance and outcomes related to economic development programs in the Commonwealth, and leveraging the existing work of the Office of Performance Management and Oversight in the Economic Office of Economic Development, the Executive Office of Economic Development, and also working with the Massachusetts legislature to provide strong leadership around metrics, data reporting, and equity and emulating what we did during the public health emergency crisis caused by COVID-19. We want to use that kind of example as an inspiration for continued transparency and consideration for all regions and all humans across our state. And last, but not least, are all the next steps here. So, following this hearing, we have two immediate next steps before us. First, we will submit the plan to the governor for final approval. As outlined in the statute, the plan must be approved by the governor and posted online by no later than December 31st. Then in the new year, we will push forward with proposing an economic development bill. We are working closely with ANF and Secretary Gorkwitz and the governor's office, and we will be drafting a bill. And then once filed, we look forward to closely working with all of you in the House and the Senate on that bill. So last thing is just, we are very grateful. Thank you again so much for all of your collaboration and your partnership. And thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. This plan is the result of collaboration between the committee, the legislature, our key stakeholders, and the entire administration. It's been a tremendous honor to work on this plan, and I look forward to hearing your feedback, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you and your staff and the Planning Council members for all their hard work putting this together. I know it was a lot of work, so thank you. I had a question. with a number of federal bills that have passed recently that have a lot of dollars floating around, do we need to do anything more? Like, what are your suggestions as far as the legislature and making sure that we can maximize getting those federal dollars back to the Commonwealth?
That's a great question, and we are in a unique moment in time where there is significant federal funding available. We are working very closely cross-cabinet and with Quentin Palfrey on the team, and he's built up a federal funding office, and with Ro Rasky in D.C. To make sure we go after all those funds. So I think that we are so grateful already for all the support from the legislature. The matching funds have been key to helping us win things like CHIPS and science, and the commitment from the legislature has been also really important as we've talked to the folks in ARPA-H. So I'm sure there's more we can do, but I will defer to Quentin and Will and the rest of the team there to help us define that.
I know there was a focus on housing, and that it's been split off now. But do you anticipate any aspects of the economic development bill to have housing components to it, or is that more towards what the governor's already filed with their housing bond bill?
I think the latter. So I will defer to Secretary Augustus. The governor and Secretary Augustus put forth a very ambitious housing bond bill, and I think the majority of the programs are going to be part of that.
I'll open it up. Senator?
Thank you. First of all, Secretary, I want to thank not only you, but your whole team. Been phenomenal to work with, and just really a breath of fresh air about openness, transparency, just, really a great group to work with. So we really appreciate that. And this is a Herculean effort to try to put all this stuff together. Just a couple questions. Can you just kind of talk us through some of your visions for what elements of the plan will be implemented by the administration, and what are things that you're going to need our help with?
Well, I mean, there are many different parts of the plan, and I think as we get into the economic development bill, we'll get into more specifics around, which things will require legislation and legislative changes, regulatory changes, versus which things require funding, versus which things we can actually just go ahead and do on our own with reorganization or refocusing. So I think we'll get into a lot more of those details as we get into the bill.
Okay. And can you kind of expand on how you want to make it easier for businesses and permitting and stuff like that, or just maybe some more details about how we can become more business friendly?
I think there are a lot of different ideas there. So the business front door is going to be helpful because it'll be one central point that any company can go to, whether you're a hairdresser or a large global public company, and just tell us who you are, what kind of business you're in, and most of all, what help do you need. So if you have a permitting issue, what's the issue, and then we can then help accelerate and expedite resolution of it. On the permitting front in particular, we are working closely with Secretary Tepper. A lot of the permitting issues fall with EEA, so we have a bunch of cross-cabinet collaborations already working on that. And again, we'll part of the goal of the competitiveness cabinet is for large, complicated projects in particular that we try to elevate and prioritize and get expedited answers on some of these things.
Okay, and something where do you see more untraditional corners of the innovation economy, like the alternative protein sector, for example, fitting in here?
I love alternative proteins.
Okay.
That would fall under, I would say, actually for that specific example, that would fall under climate tech. A lot of the drive for alternative proteins right now is because the way that we mass kind of raise cattle and other proteins is not good for the environment. So a lot of the innovation and investment in R&D and venture funding is really in the climate tech sector. So that would fall under climate tech.
Okay. And just a kind of a long-term question. So right now our state's GDP is about $700 billion. Like, how do we really become a $1 trillion economy here in Massachusetts? And what are the things ultimately beyond this economic plan you think we need to be thinking about as well, long term?
This is the way we become more than $1 trillion.
Okay.
So if we do these three big buckets of things, I am confident. So the thing that's exciting about this plan, and the thing that's really important to think about for Massachusetts, I just had breakfast today with a bunch of women CFOs in tech. And if you go around the room and you talk to each of them about their businesses, all of the areas that our companies are in are not kind of old technology, commodity, vanilla areas. The majority of our economy is aligned around industries that are growing. Healthcare is growing. Life sciences is growing. Climate tech is growing. Advanced manufacturing is growing. AI is growing. Robotics are growing. So we have a ton of tailwinds in growth sectors. And so we just need to make sure that we continue to lengthen our lead and to continue to invest and continue to implement all of these initiatives here. And those sectors are growing already. If we can just continue to not even just hold our share, but even increase our share, we're going to become $1 trillion GDP.
And just kind of to maybe expand on that, something you've talked about, we've talked about is keeping talent here. And we obviously know about the housing, we know about transportation, but are there any other areas that we should be doing that we could keep younger talent here? And how do we keep especially the college kids that so many are coming here? We do a great job recruiting them, but we don't do as good of a job keeping them here. So.
Yeah, I mean, talent it's one of our three biggest priorities. And for our state, we are so uniquely positioned. We have amazing homegrown talent, the best K through 12 education systems, and we have the world's best brains coming to our schools to study. We have all of these colleges and universities doing the admissions process for us and finding the best talent. We just need to keep them here. That will be the fuel to get us to $1 trillion plus. And you can see a lot of the specific initiatives in the plan are aimed exactly at that, at retaining them. And so the four areas we talked about in talent around college graduates, around international talent, around non-college pathways with mass talent, and as well as trades and professions, all of those initiatives will help retain talent. And then in the section on fundamentals, we talked a lot about we just need to make sure we're affordable and equitable and competitive against other states on things like housing and transportation. And then the other part of it is telling our story. We have so many amazing things, and I think that our story in Massachusetts resonates with young people, right? They care about things like climate change. They care about things like solving big problems and missions. We just need to do a better job of telling that story consistently so people know what we stand for and why you want to come here and be on Team Massachusetts. So all of these, I think, will help contribute to that.
Any thoughts on how we keep foreign-based students here that may have trouble with immigrations?
Yeah, and so we, as I mentioned, we don't control immigration laws. That's controlled by the federal government. However, we have a pilot that was started at UMass Boston called the Global Entrepreneur in Residence Program. So you can't change the federal immigration laws, but we can help students navigate it. So this pilot that they had at UMass Boston was very effective. They met with all kinds of students to say, okay, give us your background and let us help be a concierge to help you figure out what do you need, how do you get the right visa, what kind of, try to match you with the right employers. So how do we now take that program and scale it up throughout the state so that if you're international and you want to be American, come be American in Massachusetts. We'll help you navigate it. We'll be the best state to guide you through the process to stay here in the country in Massachusetts. I mean, we already are one of the states with the highest percentage of immigrants. How do we keep that and also extend that?
Just to follow up on that talent question, I've heard from a lot of trades folks about, getting younger people involved in the trades at the, average age of maybe an electrician or a plumber might be in the 50s or higher. So can you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so that is why that is a priority. Under our Undersecretary Leila D'Amelia, who's here somewhere, she and her team have spent a ton of time working on this piece of the plan, which is today we license about 500,000 people across our trades, and that in professions, which includes a whole range, plumbers, electricians, hairdressers, massage therapists, the whole range, realtors, the whole range of professions and trades. The big focus here is how do we make sure that we are easy to work with and that we are doing everything we can to modernize our systems. How can we make sure that our requirements are competitive with other states? How do we think about things like reciprocity? How do we make sure that we have all the systems to be more responsive? Today, we still have people coming into the office in person, trying to fill out forms and trying to make phone calls. So there's a whole set of initiatives that Undersecretary D'Amelia and her team have worked to try to make this whole section of trades and professions much more attractive and much more easy for young people to get in.
I'd like to open it up to members. Senator?
It's not. I don't know if this is working. Oh, yeah, it is. Awesome. So thank you, Secretary. I also have a few questions, and thanks for your presentation and getting access to be able to review the report before you presented. I'm going to ask just a couple and then open it up to my colleagues. I don't want to hog the mic. But I have a few questions around the racial wealth gap, venture capital, GDP as a measurement. And so I'm going to start there.
Please.
Throughout the report, we heard the words equity, and I just want to really re-stress to everyone that diversity and inclusion is not the same thing as equity and justice, and that we have to push harder to integrate and keep folks of different backgrounds, particularly those that are marginalized. We had a very robust conversation in the Senate when we were doing the tax relief bill around competitiveness. And if you remember, I shared a lot about my colleagues that it's also about belonging and feeling like I'm born in Massachusetts, lived here my whole life. I'm from Roxbury, but I haven't always felt like I've belonged in the Commonwealth. I was educated here at Wellesley, and it was very easy for me to leave to go to Atlanta or North Carolina or Washington, D.C., where belonging was easier in Black communities as things have really changed in the Commonwealth for everyone, but particularly for those of us that are Black and brown and women. So the first question I have is around the measurement of GDP. And I'm going to write what I wrote here, but it's the measurement of GDP has fostered a fixation on growing the pie that sometimes ignores the growth that is distributed as more and more of growth in our Commonwealth, but it's only concentrated in a few areas where it feels like it is. And feeling like we can't totally evaluate the effectiveness of our economic development policies without, a consistent, high-quality measure of how economic growth is distributed in the Commonwealth, particularly across geographic and non-geographic communities who've historically been in lowest percentiles and living in the margins. It brings me back to the point, and I'm really happy that this is included. Although we're number one in so many categories, we're third in income inequality at the top and top 5, and that's a real big problem for folks that want to remain here. So I'm trying to figure out what is the administration's plan to measure how growth is distributed aside from our sort of on top of GDP. I know it's important. I actually had a conversation with the chair here earlier around, I know it's incredibly important. We want to grow to $1 trillion, but how do we actually measure that so we actually know the truth about how it's being distributed across the Commonwealth?
I mean, well, first of all, this is the Massachusetts story. So this is, I love hearing your story, and we're so grateful to have so many awesome, diverse folks here in our state as part of Team Massachusetts, but we need to do better. And so we don't look at just only one metric. So I think when you think about equity, which is a very key part of the Healy Driscoll priorities and also very near and dear to my heart, think about equity, there's 2 ways to get equity. We can be more equal, but have everything stay the same. Or the real way to get equity, I think, is to continue to grow and have everyone lift up and to close the gap. And so I think we need to measure multiple metrics. So looking at GDP overall is important, looking at GDP growth is important, but looking at the gap and closing the gap is really important. And so the Gini coefficient is a number that I pay a lot of attention to. I'm a former economist, and it is the universal way to look at income inequality. In our state, we want to look at Gini coefficient by different areas, by race, but also by region. Our gap in race is quite dramatic. So if you look at kind of average income by race, it's a $20,000, $30,000 difference. It's also equally dramatic by region. Western Mass versus Eastern Mass, even amongst people of the same race, is $20,000 or $30,000. And so we have a lot of work to do on thinking about income inequality. And so we need to look at a whole variety of metrics. If you look at the plan, a lot of the initiatives are focused on different parts of the economy and different types of people. So just to give you a couple of examples, we want to continue the investment in things like housing, transportation, and infrastructure because that helps all communities, especially gateway cities and rural communities, where we know some of those gaps are the biggest. We also want to invest in different types of talent, things like Mass Talent. Mass Talent is the program that the governor announced in June. Secretary Jones and the Workforce Skills Cabinet work on it. It is focused on 4 high-growth verticals where you can get a starting salary of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 without a college degree. So that's in biomanufacturing, in life sciences, it's in advanced manufacturing and robotics, it's in climate tech and clean energy jobs, and it is also in healthcare. These are 4 areas where you don't have to have a college degree, where you can have a very high-paying job that gets you kind of up the economic ladder. I was in Quincy yesterday with Speaker Mariano, and it was incredibly inspiring to hear these students talk about how our state funding of their workforce certification got them jobs at Harvard Medical School as a technician, or got them jobs at these big life sciences firms like Sanofi. And people saying, I never thought as an immigrant that I would be able to have a job at Harvard Medical School, earning great income and supporting my family and my community. But these are pathways that are available here in our state. We want to continue to fund them and make them more accessible for all kinds of people. And also, by the way, it's a great win for companies. We had the companies there yesterday that were thrilled to get this talent in their workforce. And then there's a lot in here around small businesses as well, because that is a very clear entryway for a lot of folks from diverse backgrounds. So there are many aspects of this plan that are specifically focused on equity. And then as we track our success, we're going to be looking at a variety of metrics. We can't only look at the absolute GDP or absolute GDP growth. We need to dig in several layers to make sure that we understand the equity component of it.
Thank you. That was really robust. You're always going to be an economist, by the way. Yeah, I always think about that. I should have studied that in school. The next two questions, one is around supplier diversity and procurement and strengthening reporting and compliance. I don't know what the new numbers are, and definitely want to give the administration a chance. It's been 10 months. Really happy that you guys are here. But the last time I checked, we do about 1% or less in our purchasing and our business with Black and brown businesses in the Commonwealth, which is abysmal. And we saw that the same rate was in the city of Boston, for example, a few years ago, and now it's increased from that lower than 1% all the way to 12 to 15%, just with some changes of regulations or just focusing on that. And so I just was wondering if there is sort of a basic plan that you're thinking about to take that from less than 1% to something more aligned with the percentage of the number of people in the Commonwealth that identify. Even if it went up to 10%, 15 or 20%, it'd be very aligned with the number of people of color, particularly Black and brown people, who are in the Commonwealth and who are starting businesses or trying to maintain businesses, but have no connectivity to sort of the state's purchasing power. And I'll give an example. On his way out, the Governor Baker met with the Black and Latino caucus and talked about I think it was 584 businesses that were doing construction work with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and there was one Black woman-owned firm out of 584. Although there had been a growth in women-owned enterprises, mostly of them, there was like 38 were owned by white women, and Black women were still at the lowest number of businesses. And we're seeing them grow all across the country, but for some reason they're not growing here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, so this is a great question. So if you remember, we talked about what are the powers of the state, and I think it was number 4 is using our state purchasing power. We do spend a lot of money as a state, and how can we use that that spending for good? So the governor cares deeply about this, and the lieutenant governor does as well. They kicked off an equity assessment process with an outside consultant, and that work is now underway to look across every single secretariat around how we deploy resources. We're part of that effort, and I've been to a bunch of the meetings, and I think we'll hopefully be seeing some of the results of that study soon. The actual procurement office is under Secretary Gorkowitz, so I'll defer to him and his team. I think it's OSD who kind of works on that. But I certainly agree with you. There's a lot more we can be doing, and I think the city of Boston is a great example. If you're intentional, you can really make a difference. The part of our plan that addresses this is really helping more businesses succeed and actually go and apply to be on the state procurement system. So that is what we're focused on in this plan, but certainly I know the governor, lieutenant governor, and Secretary Gorkowitz are also aligned with those priorities.
Awesome. And my final question is around venture capital. One of the things that's really interesting is I really believe, having been a Bostonian all my life, we've seen the seaport balloon, and it's really inspiring to see a new community emerge, but also for us to rival, I'm very competitive, rival California and other places that have this sector. But Mass Ventures, I just want to share about this. So in California, Black startup entrepreneurs raised about 1% of capital from venture capital firms and private equity firms. And recent legislation, which they used the state legislature to help, passed in the state that will require diversity reporting of venture capital and private equity firms. And we know in Massachusetts, we're not doing much better. Black startup founders have actually only raised 0.56% of their overall venture capital from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so, and the same number that year before was 0.45, so there was some growth. How can the administration play a role as an important field, venture capital? If you want businesses to grow here, tech businesses particularly, they have to be able to get the money. And usually they stay and remain in the places where they have the easiest access or better chances to get the access to their funding. How can the administration play a role in ensuring a more equitable playing field when it comes to accessing capital? We hear from businesses of all types that access to capital is one of the major, major challenges.
Yeah, this is a great question. So I come from the venture world and private equity world, and there is a lot of opportunity to give funding to more diverse founders and CEOs and teams. And I have been a startup CFO and COO myself, so I know how difficult it is. I would say a couple things here. One is that We already are very intentional about this with our state, the state programs that we have. One of the very unique and awesome tools in our state is our quasi-institutions. So we have our State Economic Development Office, but we also have these quasis that are separate from the state, but actually pretty much fully funded by the state in many cases, and also I chair the boards of these quasis or sit on the boards. They are a huge tool for us to actually get funds and resources and programs into the economy. And so if you look at our quasis, and actually we have Larry Andrews here today from Mass Growth Capital, he and his quasi, in partnership with our state, give out all kinds of small business loans and grants, and we're very intentional about where we give those to. So we give them to the small businesses and the communities that need it the most. Same with Mass Ventures. Mass Ventures is a state quasi that is actually self-funding, and they do an amazing job. They give out early stage seed funding, and they're fully aligned with the state. They go out of their way to go and find founders who are diverse, and not just diverse from an ethnicity or from a gender perspective. They go around the state. They fund people from all kinds of regions throughout the state, and try to lead. And if they can lead by being the seed capital, they can help attract other venture firms to go in. Mass Life Sciences has a program called Mass Next Gen, which is specific seed funding for women and diverse founders of life sciences. The statistics that you just named are in general. The stats of diversity in biotech firms is also pretty terrible. So Mass Next Gen has been very successful. I just had dinner last week with a bunch of women founders who were funded by Mass Next Gen, and they said the funding was transformative and enabled them to stay here. And also, more than just the funding, it gave them the credibility to then go and raise from other venture firms, and also to have the network of each other to talk to and to work together as they scale their startups. So we already do a bunch of those programs, and in this plan, the goal is to continue to do those and also to accelerate and amplify, because I think this is a macro problem in finance and investment firms, which I have personally lived through in my whole life, but I think we can lead. We are leading, and we continue to want to lead for future generations. That's the whole point of this plan, is we should find a better way and become a model for the rest of the country.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And the other thing I should say is we've met many times with our venture firms here in our state. There was a very large convening of all of the venture firms in Massachusetts, a couple weeks ago. They are very committed to this. We have awesome folks in our ecosystem. They want to be partners in this as well, and so I think we have an opportunity to work with them to get them to be more intentional as well.
Vice Chair Vargas.
Secretary, thank you again for all the work that you put to put this report together, and thank you for coming to Haverhill in particular for one of these sessions. It was great to have you up there. Two quick questions. One around childcare. How do you view childcare being a part of the competitiveness question, and could you potentially see childcare being a part of the discussion when it comes to the EcoDev bill, particularly when it comes to partnering with businesses to provide childcare for their employees? Do you see that being a part of the discussion for the EcoDev bill?
First of all, I just realized I did not. I need to respond to you on something else. You sent me a note.
Don't worry about it.
I apologize about
It's all
that. But second of all, yes, I think when we look at competitiveness and we look at fundamentals, I think for us right now, transportation and housing are the obvious glaring ones, but there are many other ones, including childcare. And we have spent time with Secretary Tutwiler. He has a team in his group that focuses on this, and they have actually submitted some inputs into this plan as well. And as we work on the bill, we'll follow up with them. The other thing we're really lucky in our state is the world's probably largest childcare provider, Bright Horizons, is headquartered here. And so we met recently with them as well, and they would love to be partners with us to think about this. They work across the country and across the world, and they have lots of ideas. So that is a great opportunity for us to leverage them as well.
Great, thank you. And then the second question relates to around the migrant crisis that we have right now. So much of it has been framed as sort of a burden on the Commonwealth. But looking at the population trends, the workforce needs, the challenges that we have here, is it also an opportunity for us as a state to be able to address some of the workforce challenges?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the governor, lieutenant governor, and also folks like Secretary Walsh, Secretary Jones, Secretary Gussis are all over this topic, because we have amazing folks who have found themselves here in Massachusetts who would like to work. And we have lots of employers who need people to work. And the thing that we're navigating is all of the challenges in between those two things. And so I think there definitely is an opportunity here, and I know my other cabinet colleagues are hard at work trying to find paths for these folks to get into the workforce.
That's great. And I think, the components around messaging and the marketing and the message that we want to send around, not just this issue, but Massachusetts more broadly, is a really important component to this plan. I think oftentimes people see that as the soft stuff, but it's really important for us to be able to build the narrative, the story, and the capital to implement many of the things that we're talking about here. So appreciate that focus, and maybe it's just because in my previous life I was a marketing director, but marketing is really important, and I appreciate you guys putting that into this. Mr. Chair, I'll give it back to you.
Senator Comerford? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's good. Thank you so much, Secretary. It's a tour de force presentation, and the work of you and your team and all the folks who have contributed is really beautiful. I wanted to look at two different areas with you. One is around higher education, public higher education. I love the internship idea. Secretary Chancellor Julie Chen at Lowell, right, is really trailblazing this, and I know she was part of your great work, and she's seen such unbelievable opportunities come from the internship idea. And I'm sure you know that right now there's a conversation statewide around free community college and what it would really look like if we cracked open the equity proposition for generations of students. So, and one of the conversations we're having as a subset of that is, in addition to, of course, a liberal arts education, right, and the opportunity of democracy building, right, which is in education writ large, how is community college also better positioned to be useful to the waves of industry that you're attracting to the Commonwealth?
Yep.
And I just wonder if you could riff for a bit in the way you do on how we could do a better job. Certainly we have to fund community colleges to do this, but making sure that the students going to these institutions, maybe they're going to want to stop at a 2-year, maybe they're going to want to go on to 4 or beyond, but how can we better make sure that these institutions are positioned through credit and non-credit bearing courses to really help be that kind of wind at your back as you attract new industries?
I mean, this is a great question and a huge opportunity for us. So Chancellor Chen is part of our Economic Development Planning Council and brought up a lot of this, and I actually just saw her twice today already.
Oh, my goodness.
But I think, I should say also that we're very lucky in our state that we have such a strong public higher education system and also a strong community college system. It's amazing because also those students and graduates tend to stay in our state at a much higher rate than our private higher education institutions, and we love them too. But I think there's a special advantage that if you go to a public higher education school or a community college, you're more likely to stay here. There are a lot of opportunities here, and so we and the Workforce Skills Cabinet with Secretary Jones and Secretary Tutwiler have had a lot of conversations around how these pieces fit together. One of the goals of Mass Talent and trying to focus on these 4 big verticals to start with was trying to align community colleges and curriculum with employers and really with students earlier. And even thinking back on, Secretary Tutwiler has been launching programs around early college and career pathways, helping young people kind of consider the range of options, whether you want to go liberal arts and, go on to graduate school, whatever, or do you want to have a more of a path around some of these high growth careers that don't require a college degree, and what do those look like, and why would you choose them, and how do you get into those paths in a much easier way? And so that has been the active dialogue we've been having along these 4 verticals with Mass Talent, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I know that the governor and lieutenant governor have already invested a lot in community colleges with things like Mass Reconnect, which I think is having, every time I see a community college president, yesterday we were with one, and last week I was with one as well. They're very grateful for all that support, but I think there's a lot more we can do. And so I don't think we're done here yet. So a lot more opportunity to come.
Terrific. That's exciting, and it'll be fun to see how these get better integrated.
Yeah, and I think a lot of other states are good models for this. A bunch of us were actually in North Carolina not too long ago, and they have done a lot of work on this as well. So we're actively studying and trying to learn from others and trying to make sure that we take best practice, but then continue to innovate ourselves and lead.
Wonderful. My second question, and I'll be brief, is It starts with a thank you for rural communities. You were just in Montague with your great team yesterday, recognizing the unique challenges and opportunities in the 181 of the 351 cities and towns. And we're thrilled with Director Goby being appointed by you, and thank you for that and the entirety of your team. I love the focus in the plan on rural communities. I love the rural designation, and I love that you're beginning to, in this plan, which is outstanding, to think about the different interventions, like old mill buildings, for example, and the reuse transformation possible. I wonder, as you look at the evaluative metrics that you're going to use, are you thinking about a separate subset or a sister subset of rural metrics? You are, okay.
Yes. So we, Director Goby knows, we've had many good active dialogue and discussion around what does success for a rural community look like?
Perfect, okay.
And it's probably going to be a different set of metrics than a Cambridge or a Somerville or something. So we are being very intentional about what are the goals and what are the right metrics and right ways to track progress for all of the different parts of our economy, including rural communities.
It'll be so thrilling to watch the plan move the needle, as I know you intend to do.
Yeah.
And just to think about the different ways that we can, the different challenges we have, and how we try to tackle those challenges through these interventions and more that I know you're planning. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's an important part of the plan.
Thank you. Anybody else? Murray?
Thank you. And Secretary, thank you for the information. And obviously, this is a very important discussion. I wondered if you could just maybe give a little bit of specifics or thoughts that you may have around what you've talked about in terms of the climate tech. And I see on the handouts that will be intentional about creating the world's leading climate tech ecosystem. And of course, on the materials that we received online, you talk about pioneering industry strength. And I say this because I think that in addition to the obvious benefits to the environment that the clean energy and recycling industries have, to me, they're a tremendous potential for economic growth. And the recycling industry in itself is certainly in trouble and I think needs some assistance. So do you have any specific thoughts or ideas or directions that you're looking to in that regard?
Yeah, and this is a great question, and we absolutely agree with you. We think, again, that in many places I think there's a false choice that people are trying to make where they say, well, we'll either be good for business or we'll be good for the environment. Here in Massachusetts, we're going to lead by being and both. So we have to be a leader in fighting climate change. This is the existential threat of our time. And in doing that, we're going to create a ton of economic growth. So that's really the aspiration here. And, so we're very lucky here to be partnering with Secretary Tepper and Energy and Environmental Affairs, and also with the Mass Clean Energy Center, which will be our quasi that really works to be the center point for this economic growth strategy around climate tech. And when you think about climate tech, our aspiration is that right now we are known as being the world leader in life sciences. We want to be the same have that same kind of leadership position in climate tech. So we didn't get to life sciences by accident. We were very intentional in convening, resourcing, working together, messaging, and former Governor Patrick made a bunch of investments. Governor Baker continued those. Governor Healy's going to reauthorize those. We need to be similarly focused here on climate tech. We have all of the ingredients here. There's so many amazing innovations, discoveries, R&D, large companies, small companies across the region that are doing work in this area. But for us to really catalyze and become the world leader, we need to be intentional in the same way we were with life sciences. So that's we need to put together the details along with the CEC and our new CEO there and also Secretary Tepper. I will say one thing that's very exciting for us in climate tech is that we really think climate tech has an opportunity to help all regions of our state. It's a very broad category, and so within climate tech, to your point, you have recycling, but you also have offshore wind. You also have, fusion. You also have concrete, decarbonized concrete. You also have alternative proteins. There's many different types of companies that are all under climate tech that can be in all different parts of our state. And so I think it's going to have a lot of different regional impacts, and also climate tech contains lots of types of jobs. We need all kinds of PhDs and AI people and engineers. We also need a lot of hourly workers to help us install EV facilities and put up offshore wind and all across the value chain. And so this is an industry that we should own and lead in, while also fighting and leading and fighting climate change, and also can help our state across all regions and all types of people. So we're very excited about this, and we'll be putting the details together as part of the bill.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with your philosophy and approach, and look forward to those details. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any colleagues online? Nope. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Miranda.
When you're asking all the questions in front of the class and your teacher tells you to sit down. I just had a couple more questions, and I don't know what's wrong with my mic, but hopefully. Thank you to Rep. Vargas for mentioning childcare. One of the things that we see in my community, it's 62 to 65% female head of household, and the cliff effect really has impacted moms returning back to work. And so just was wondering if you've been thinking about that, as more and more people say, we want to enter the workforce, we want to get a better job, but I do need support with my rent. And I do get other state subsidies, including SNAP. But as soon as I make $20 more, I get cut off from these life-saving, family-saving initiatives that I'm a part of. And so I had one question on that. And then on affordable home ownership, I just had a specific question. It is a core pillar of the administration's housing plan, but many who've purchased homes through affordable home ownership opportunities have shared that experience with selling their home or the process of inheriting on affordable family home when someone passes away. And we know that home ownership being passed down has created a lot of generational wealth in many different communities. And so I had a question about the administration's plan on affordable home ownership, to not only as a major tool for everyone, but particularly around the racial wealth gap, and current programs that do not allow for these affordable properties to be inherited or passed on. So you're getting into these programs, you're buying your first home, it's really exciting, but 10, 20, 30 years down the line, the same way that other families and communities are generating generational wealth is not afforded to you or comes at a penalty.
Yeah. Both great questions, and I'm actually glad you asked about childcare again, because one thing I forgot to say, Rep. Vargas, was that one of the things we were very excited about and very grateful for your partnership in was the childcare tax credit and the tax bill, because we do have very low unemployment, which is something that I think is generally good. However, the flip side of that is we have a lot of workforce shortages in our state, and I do believe that the child care tax credit will hopefully enable people to get off the sidelines and get into the workforce, because they'll now have this credit to help pay for child care. So that was a really important part of why that that passage of that tax package is going to, I think, have impact on our economy. On your question on affordable housing ownership, I fully agree with you. I think, again, as an economist, you can see that being able to buy a house is the first step in having building wealth in a family. In terms of the specific programs, I will leave that to Secretary Augustus. I think he's put a lot of work into his housing bond bill, and there are a lot of different initiatives in there to help support more affordable housing ownership, especially in different racial communities.
Oh, great, thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Great. Thank you so much for your time and effort and everything that you did. We really appreciate it, and look forward to reviewing the Economic Development Bill.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Adjourned.